So this is my video of the procedures for the rough draft of Lesson Plan 1, which is the Poetic Analysis Lesson Plan. So the first procedure is students will answer review questions on the topic of literary devices to refresh memory on what some of those devices are and how they might appear in a poem. So I would be asking questions about the different literary devices used in poetry in order to help students recall the definitions of them and how they might affect a poem. So this is really just to get them ready to identify them in a poem on their own and be ready to explain them in their short essay later. And that's why I included this step. The second procedure is students will read through the poem Annabel Lee by Poe silently to themselves and list examples of literary devices they found in the poem. So I included this step because students have to read the poem in order to analyze it and find the literary devices, and I wanted them to have some individual practice finding them on their own before they worked with another student or a group. And at this point I can also walk around the room and assess who is having trouble identifying devices used, so I can give them any additional instruction they might need. The third procedure is students whose desks have been arranged in group formation since the beginning of the unit, so they're not like moving their desks right now, they've already been that way, so it's not disruptive. They work in small groups to compare the literary devices they took note of and how they think those devices impact the mood and understanding of the poem. So at this point, students are now basically comparing notes on what they found and discussing it with each other and how they feel the devices they individually identified affect the mood of the poem. And I included this step so students have the opportunity to see some examples they might not have picked up on their own, or if one of theirs doesn't make sense, this is a chance for someone to let them know so they don't write about it and then later figure out it was a mistake. Also, discussing amongst themselves will help generate some ideas for what they're going to write later, because often explaining why they did something helps create an idea of how they might phrase that in a paper. So the next procedure is teacher, me, explains what needs to be included in the analysis of the poem that students will begin working on. And what needs to be included is stating the examples they found, explaining the examples they found, and explaining how the examples develop the mood and the poem. So this stage is pretty self-explanatory. I'm pretty much just stating what has to be included in the short essay that they're writing, and if students aren't sure about an example they discussed, or if they have any questions about what they're writing, they can ask at this point. And I included this step basically just so students will know how I want the essay structured. And finally, the last step is students work independently on computers to type their short essay. So students are now writing their essays independently, and I included this step because I need them to write a short essay so I can more accurately assess if they really do understand literary devices and how to analyze them. So those are the procedures.